Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Astrology with Ethan podcast. It is your host, Ethan, here, and I am coming to you today from the city streets of Sydney, Australia. My family is visiting me down under, and we are on a trip to Sydney, so I don't have my normal recording set up, and instead just thought I would take a walk around the city and voice memo you a podcast today on a subject that I am thinking constantly about, whether I'm traveling or at home, and that is life purpose. I think that most of us are brought to astrology because of this subject, right? A lot of us find astrology at these transitional points in our lives where we're really wondering, okay, what are the next steps and how can I be sure that they align with my heart and soul and highest good and the highest good for everyone around me. So when we're dealing with purpose, right, we're dealing with what we came here to accomplish, in my opinion. What we are here to put effort into and invest energy into almost daily to bring some sort of light that didn't exist into the world we see, right? We're all lights and we're all learning to turn up our light so that we can bring illumination, clarity, and healing into this world. So clearly this coalesces around the luminary of the sun. And the sun in ancient astrology was really seen as your purpose. It was seen as being associated with authority figures, with priests, with people at the very top of society, right? And you can think of the sun in your chart thus as what you are potentially capable of becoming an authority on, or where you are able to go very, very far, or the vessel you contain that the light wants to enter through. So the zodiac sign and the house of your sun are incredibly important. Now, a lot of people don't resonate with their sun sign, right? They might have a night chart. They might associate more with their moon sign. But either way, I think that the sun describes less your, felt sense of purpose, but I do think that the sun describes the trajectory of coming into your purpose. I call the sun, the narrator of the life story. So it gives us a broad overview of the direction the life is headed in, but it might not be the specific thing that you feel called to do. It may, in some cases, if the sun is maybe, say, in your first house, or conjunct the lot of spirit, or conjunct the north node, which we'll talk about throughout this episode. But that's, to me, where the sun comes in when dealing with purpose, is it's giving us a bigger, broader overview of the way we're carrying our light into the world. So an example would be, sun in Gemini. A sun in Gemini might have a very varied purpose because of the nature of Mercury. They might do lots of different things to bring their light into the world. And it may be really on the nose, right? And be something like journalism or media or reporting, right? Very Gemini, or law, or something dealing in the realm of negotiation. But this could also be interpreted as, a sun in Gemini is going to have a lot of different, forms of communication and may practice these simultaneously to feel a lit up sense of purpose in the world. In general, you can think of the sun and anything solar, which includes, the top half of the chart, houses 12 through 7, as what somebody is putting their personal effort and will into. While the moon deals more with fate and what's outside of our control, the sun deals more with our spirit and what we came here to control, change, or fix. Right? So you can always consult or come back to your sun sign when you feel a little bit lost or hazy about, what the bigger story is around carrying your purpose into the world. So that brings me to the second place you can consult your purpose, which is actually one of the 7 lots. And this lot is the lot of spirit. So the lot of spirit deals with, again, the sun. You can calculate your lot of spirit on astroseek.com, or, Astro Gold or Solar Fire if you own those softwares. And this is going to be, rather than a planet, a point that relies on the sun's position to show you in your chart exactly where, the spirit wants to go, the daimon wants to express. Now, these 7 lots are an ancient tool used to determine very specific aspects of your life, right? There's a lot of courage, which shows you where you need to get more brave. There's a lot of fortune, which shows you where fated things occur. But the lot of spirit is, once again, paying attention to that solar dimension of where you maximize your efforts, where you invest your will, where you feel the light enter most. The lot of spirit, to me, in my experience, is where motivation comes alive. It's a little bit like a Mars placement, which I also might be saying because my lot of spirit is conjunct Mars. But to me, the lot of spirit just in general feels very motivating in a chart. When there are activations or transits to the lot of spirit, this can feel very stimulating. Like you are ready to hop into action, like you are ready to sort of finesse whatever that greater solar light is you carry into something specific. So I would also definitely check the lot of spirit in terms of what catalyzes or what triggers that life purpose to unfold. And of course, this also makes sense because if you do a practice like zodiacal releasing, then you can actually release your timing from the lot of spirit and see, from the vantage point of the lot of spirit, when activities, moments of catalyst, are going to come about related to your greater purpose, related to your spirit's mission. So those are 2 ancient perspectives that you can consult in the birth chart for finding your purpose, for finding the thing that brings you light, that brings you courage, that brings you the energy to accomplish, to create, to manifest something in the world. But now I want to look at 2 modern perspectives on where you can look in a chart for purpose. Now, there's a lot of controversy between the traditional and modern astrological circles, it seems, right now. But I am one who, having Jupiter in Gemini, really believes multiple perspectives are helpful and more inclusive and allow each person to individually arrive at what feels most like their purpose in this life. And I will say that while the sun and the lot of spirit do very much resonate with me, these next 2 placements in a chart I'm about to give you resonate for me the most and have consistently throughout time. And honestly, in client consultations, I see them make people really light up with a sense of, yes, this is where I'm headed. But again, that said, you can also find this through an ancient perspective, right? Through the sun or through the lot of spirit. But alas, and nevertheless, I will present to you these 2 modern perspectives. So the first modern perspective is that the North Node is your purpose. Now, the North Node is technically the point where eclipses happen, right? When you were born, this is where an eclipse would be taking place if there was an eclipse happening, right? And the eclipses show where the sun and moon intersect. So going based off ancient terminology, the sun is spirit and the moon is flesh. The moon is the body, right? So when these 2 meet on an eclipse point, what's happening in metaphysical terms is that something is going on between soul contact and body contact. The 2 are meeting in a sort of karmic, duel where, either the sun is dominating in a solar eclipse or the moon is dominating in a lunar eclipse. And so these are points of sort of extreme reconciliation with our spiritual and physical condition. In this regard, the nodes in general feel extremely important to me. They feel like places where spiritual growth really happens. And so more than maybe a career purpose, although I can definitely see the North Node serving some people in terms of career, I see the North Node as really representing a spiritual purpose. So the North Node is going to be indicative of increases, of places where more events happen throughout life. That's actually an ancient perspective on the North Node. But in a more modern perspective, the North Node is where, your body and your soul need to unite, where they need to come into sync with each other. Now, the South Node, or the opposite point, is in ancient astrology about losses, about decreases, about endings. And in modern astrology, it's more where we need to let go and move on from, because it's representative of a place our soul or spirit has been before, where it's had a body, where it's had a physical experience before. And the North Node is where it hasn't yet. The North Node is where it needs to go, is where the soul needs to integrate a new kind of physical experience, which Jeffrey Wolf Green, an evolutionary astrologer, sort of described as our ego, right? So like where we need to build a new ego, where we need to build a new container for life itself is that North Node point. And honestly, I could not agree more. I think many people think of their North Node as a place where, they have not yet explored, where there's a lot to learn, where there's, new experiences waiting for them, where, there's a necessary balancing out with the past, that exists on that North Node. And sometimes the North Node can actually become your obsession, like it can become your passion. I think that's a better word than obsession. It can really become your passion, So the North Node, let's say, can describe your spiritual purpose and your spiritual passions that drive you forward in this life. And honestly, I think as that, North Nodal eclipse point, as this place where soul and body are reconciling, as this place of increases, as this place of new developments, I think that the North Node can be a very exciting and stimulating and purposeful place. So if I were to rank, honestly, all 4 of these placements we're talking about, the Sun, the Lot of Spirit, the North Node, and then our last one, which will be Pluto, I would put the North Node number 1. Number 1. That's just based on my personal experience. You might find a Lot of Spirit resonates for you a lot more in your practice. But for little old me, it's the North Node. The other thing about the North Node, the Sun, the Lot of Spirit, is any planets that are conjunct these points, right? So, for example, I have Mercury on the North Node. I'm obsessed with learning, with writing, with astrology, with anything mercurial, like I really dig. But you might also have, Mercury on the Lot of Spirit or Mercury on the Sun. Any conjunctions to these particular points of other planets are also going to really indicate back your life purpose. Now, this will also describe the house that your purpose point is in. So, you might have the Sun, the Lot of Spirit, the North Node in the 11th house, right? And friendships and groups and communities and invention, innovation could really color your purpose, right? So just make sure that as we're talking about these, you're not just looking at the sign that these points are placed in, but the house and any planets conjunct. And if you want to go a little bit more advanced, then also the location of the planetary ruler of the sign that any of these placements are in. Okay? So last, I want to talk about Pluto. Now, Pluto comes to us through really evolutionary astrology, which is a mid 20th century modern astrological development. And Pluto, only discovered in the 1920s, as astrologers were studying it, seemed to show places where major transformation was happening. Major shadows were, right? Darkness. And, this was a planet discovered during, uprisings in fascism. So it also shows, places with strong attachments to the past, with strong attachments to what's come before, and places that we seriously need to outgrow those patterns for the betterment of individuals and societies. In my opinion, this is what Pluto's all about. It is a place in the chart where we have powerful, powerful, powerful past connections. And thus, it indicates where we need to break free to enter into our future, to fully fulfill our purpose. So, the house and sign you have Pluto in, which by sign is going to be pretty much the same based on the generation you were in. So maybe we just start there. The sign of Pluto shows where you and your generation are coming in. It's what you know, it's where you've achieved power, it's where you have prestige, it's where you are tempted to go back to. It's where you come into the world kind of kicking, screaming, going, why don't you all understand this, right? So if you're my generation and you're Pluto and Sagittarius, you're coming in and you're like, why are we, not recognizing the wisdom in, spiritual traditions, in earth-based spirituality, in, the indigenous lands, in the environment, right? Because Sag is all about environmentalism and spirituality and kind of the macrocosm, right? So a lot of us with Pluto and Sag are coming in going, we need to go back. We need to go back to that, right? But what's actually speaking to your purpose in Pluto is its polarity point. So as a generation of Pluto and Sag, we actually need to challenge ourselves by developing the Gemini polarity to Sag. So this means we need to work on asking more questions, on doing more research, on seeing things through multiple lenses, on not just getting hooked on dogma or religion or philosophy, but seeing things through sometimes a more scientific lens or a more empirical lens, and just becoming more curious as a generation. It's showing us with that Pluto and Sag that part of our karma, part of our growth, is actually having to do with releasing dogmatic patterns of thinking, right? So look at, any Pluto sign. Let's look at, Pluto and Scorpio, the preceding generation. This generation is much more in touch with cycles of loss and death and desire and sexuality and magic and, all of these sort of dark impulses that accompany creativity, the destructive impulses. And what they're here to develop is actually the Taurus polarity. So this is about becoming more, attuned to growth and becoming more preservers of the environment and not always sort of wasting, not always excreting, not always devouring or consuming, but actually learning how to conserve, actually learning how to take care of and nourish the upper world rather than constantly sort of grasping from the underworld, right? So you get the picture. Pluto's polarity point shows us where we move out of the darkness and come into the light. And I know I keep kind of using these metaphors of light versus darkness. I am, once again, a lover of Mercury, a lover of duality, so I don't think we ever should seek to abandon one polarity in search of the other. But these polarities help us understand balance, right? These polarities really help us understand that our purpose lies in finding a balance in between what we're naturally good at, what we have raw passion for, and what challenges or what changes we need to make to balance out those passions so that they are more stronger, they are more refined and polished in a sense, right? So Pluto really brings attention to, within our purpose, this idea of polarity. Um, this idea that the polar opposite of actually every planet on our birth chart shows some sort of evolution looking to take place. And I'm going to actually add this as the fifth point of purpose you can look to is pull up your birth chart right now and imagine this birth chart in completely opposite signs and houses for every single placement. What does your chart become? You know, for me, my chart becomes completely Saturnine. It becomes completely Aquarius Capricorn because I have a lot of Cancer Leo. So that shows me that a lot of my work in general has to do with, structure and definition. And maybe that those aren't my passions, but that can certainly help bring my passions into form somehow more. So always consult the polarity of anything you're looking at to see how you can more deeply attune to it and grow into it. So let's review these 5 places of purpose we've looked at. So we started with the sun, and the sun being where the light enters, where we bring a torch into this world, guide, illuminate, and potentially gain authority in some way in society. It's descriptive of our overall journey towards our purpose. At some points, it might be what we actually do as a purpose, but in general, to me, the sun is the narrator of the life story. It's the narrator of everything, in a way, that happens underneath the sun, right? That happens while we're existing on Earth. A quick note about the moon here. You know, the moon takes the light of the sun and she carries it around the world. For me, the moon represents our daily living. So you can also see the moon as your purpose in daily life, as how you can actually take actions to execute or bring the purpose into being. But because we're more focused on purpose rather than lunar themes like fate, body, and, how we do things, I've only, been thinking in terms of the sun for right now. Okay, the next placement we talked about was the lot of spirit. This is the point that if you use zodiacal releasing or practice ancient astrology, can really show you where timing is going to catalyze where timing is going to catalyze you into your purpose. So the lot of spirit is this motivating point, this exhilarating factor, this calculation of where that solar dimension of, I have a light to share with the world is really going to flicker on. Okay? Now, the last 3 we talked about were, starting with the North Node, my personal favorite, the eclipse point, the point where soul and body reconcile with each other, where they intersect, where they have to grow into one another. The North Node shows where we need to build a new container, a new body, a new system for living so that our purpose can be fully expressed. Because it's that solar-lunar relationship the nodes speak to, the North Node is where we are growing into a new form that can hold the light of our souls in the most advantageous way. The South Node, meanwhile, is where we've already done that. It's where we've already carried light or purpose into the world. It's where we've already had a body, an ego, a physical experience. And the North Node is where, we can go to really have a whole new one. Next, we looked at Pluto and its polarity point. Pluto representing the generational power, potential, past experiences, and overall, you could just say, because past actions equal karma, you could also say karma of a generation, right? And the opposite point of Pluto is where a generation is transmuting all of the old into the new, finding balance between what they know of the past and what they're here to contribute towards the future. And the last thing I would say on Pluto is check the house you have it in, because just because Pluto is a generational planet, its house position is going to be very unique to you. So in your personal life, right, the house of Pluto is where you have personal baggage, past experiences, a comfortability, a sense of power, a sense of ownership. And the polarity to Pluto is where, you need to seek new experiences. And the house where Pluto is where you have potential to really come alive and make an impact and have a new felt sense of power in your life. Okay, and the final one I was speaking to was polarity more generally. Polarity containing this principle of integration. Any point in a birth chart that you want to work more on, even if it was like, say, Mars, you are struggling with motivation, you're struggling with taking action, and you have Mars in, let's say, Pisces, right? Well, you may want to look to the opposite point, which is Virgo, for help with, what may assist you in taking action. So Mars and Pisces, you may prefer to kind of daydream and you might struggle to get things done. Well, the opposite point of Virgo would say set a calendar, set a schedule, step into the polarity a bit more so that you can gain, the balance you need to take that action to find your purpose, right? Because one of my teachers, Ari Moshe Wolf, always talked about how, the zodiac and the houses all exist on polarities and therefore can't exist without each other. So anytime you're missing information on one placement, you look to the opposite to gain the information about how you make it work, right? And that's, I think, part of why I find the nodes in Pluto so impactful, is they really give attention to that opposite point. But you could also look at this with your sun and lot of spirit, right? You could look at the opposite point and see, and that's actually a thing in zodiacal releasing timing, is that if you have a, let's say, release point in a similar modality or similar mode or element to your native lot of spirit, then that is going to be really motivating and really life-bringing to, the one you have. So, like, I had a lot of spirit release this year in Aquarius, and my lot of spirit's in Leo. And so that was an extremely motivating time because, right, they're both fixed signs and that they oppose each other. So, polarity is very important. And of course, all the aspects, but I think oppositions and polarity give us a ton of information on how to work with what we've got. They fill in the gaps, of what we're missing in terms of information on our purpose. So you guys, I hope this episode was good for you to listen to. I'm not sure about how the audio quality turned out, or, if my breaths were, too much on your ears. But I really hope it was a fun episode to listen to. I could talk about finding your purpose in astrology all day long. And once again, I think that finding your purpose is the same as becoming your own person. It's an ongoing process. It never ends. And you're always, collecting new data and you're collecting new experiences to kind of form the person you're becoming. And so I think you can always look back to these 4 placements and the 5th placement of polarity more generally to consult who you are, what's in your heart and soul, and where you're going. So I hope this was enjoyable. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review on Spotify or YouTube. It really helps get the podcast out there. And as always, I'm available for readings, link in the bio, and keep up on socials for more astrology content. All right, you guys, I will leave you there. See you next time. Have a great day.